Hi, hello, welcome back to class. Welcome back to English language class. Good to have you again. Okay, so we're going right into the class. And um, in the last class, we started on grammatical functions. We started looking at what grammar looks like, right? And we are continuing on that. Okay, but today we are looking at tenses and their correct usage. Tenses and their correct usage. As you can see on the board, that's what we are going to be doing today. All right. So I'm sure that we are familiar with what tenses are from our primary school days. We already know what present tense is, we know what past tense is, we know what future tense is. Now we're going to go a bit deeper into these tenses. That's why we say tenses and their correct usage. So in this class, we are going to be looking at present tenses, past tenses, and future tenses. All right, we were used to present tense, past tense, and future tense. All right, so I could tell you that under present tense, we have different other tenses. Okay, like three or four of them under present tense. Under past tense, the same thing, and under future tense, the same thing. So those tenses under these tenses that we are familiar with, the present, past, and future tenses that we've been familiar with, are what we're going to look at today. The tenses under the tenses that we have been familiar with. So that's what we are basically looking at today. And like I mentioned, we started the last class on grammatical patterns in use. And this was where we looked at subject verb agreement. So we're going to do a very quick review on what we did in the last class before we dive into today's class. All right. So we started on subject verb agreement in the last class, and I started by explaining or getting us reminded on what agreement means. And agreement means things matching or going together correctly. So when you have two or more things that go together or they match, you say they agree. All right. So for the subject verb agreement, I mentioned that your subject must always agree with your verb. Your subject must always agree with your verb. That's how you can be grammatically correct when you're constructing a sentence, whether you're writing or whether you are speaking. So your sentence, your subject must always agree with your verb. And there were some rules that we looked at on the subject verb agreement. The first thing, or the first basic rule we looked at is singular subject, singular verb, plural subject, plural verb. All right, so we said when there's a singular subject, there has to be a singular verb, and or something portraying a singular verb. And when we have a plural subject, then we should have something portraying a plural verb. Then we looked at rule number two, that is the rule of I and you. I and pronoun you that always take a plural verb. You know, in the first rule, we said a singular verb has to take a singular subject has to take a singular verb, and a plural subject has to take a plural verb. But in this case, I and you are subjects that do not take the singular subject. Even though the subject are singular, they do not take the singular plural, the singular verb. They take the plural verb instead. That's for rule I and rule U. Then the third rule that we looked at is subject joined by the conjunction and. All right, subject joined by and. Okay, and the fourth one we looked at is the rule of or and nor. We're used to either or, neither nor. All right, so those rules are talking about the verb matching the closest subject in the sentence. Then we looked at the fifth rule, and of course, the fifth rule is the rule of there is versus there are. Okay, there is versus there are. Then we looked at the sixth rule, and that's the rule of some words always are singular. And once they are singular, once they appear singular, you have to use a singular verb. And these words include words like each, nobody, everyone, somebody. Okay, all right. So words like that are always singular. And then when you have to use your verb, it means your verb has to be a singular verb. And then lastly, we looked at the rule of collective nouns. The rule of collective nouns. And this is where we talked about collective nouns can either be singular or can be plural. Okay, they can either be singular or be plural. So depending on how they appear, before you know what verb should go with them. All right, so that's what we did in the last class, and today we are diving into tenses and their correct usage. Tenses and their correct usage. All right, so we start by looking at what tense is. Okay, so when we talk about tense, what is tense? Okay, so tenses or tense tells us when something happens, or tenses tell us when something happens. When you hear the word tense, tense is the singular form, while tenses is the plural form. All right, so when I say tense tells us when something happens, that's talking about in the singular aspect or in the singular form of it. But when I say tenses, tell us when something happens. I'm talking in the plural aspect. So both of them, I can use them interchangeably. All right. So when we talk about tense or tenses, we're talking about um, when something happens. All right. Tenses tell when something happens. Okay, so this is where the issue of present tense, past tense, future tense comes in. All right, so when you hear present tense, you already know that okay, the tense has to do with something in the present. When you hear of past, you know that it has to do with something in the past, and then when you hear of future, you know it has to do with something that's happening in the future. All right, okay, so we have the three major tenses. Okay, the three major tenses that we are familiar with. We have the present tenses, we have the past tenses, and we have the future tenses. Future tenses. Okay, so when we talk about um, present, for present, we can say it's happening now. That's the best way we can describe it. It's happening now. Okay, and then for past, we say it already happened. It already happened. Okay, and then for the future tense, we say it will happen later. Okay, so you can see where this is coming in. Present means it's happening now. When we talk about present tenses, it's happening now. We talk about past tenses, we talk about it already happened. And when we talk about future tenses, we talk about it will happen later. Okay, so these are basically the tenses that we are going to be looking at. So under the present tenses, we are going to be looking at some sub tenses. Under the past tenses, we are going to be looking at some sub tenses, and under the future tenses, we will also be looking at some sub tenses. All right, so we're going to start with the present tenses. I'm going to wipe off the board now. Okay, like I said, we're starting with the present tenses. Okay, and like I said, the present tenses is showing that something or things are happening now. We're talking about the noun time now. All right, so we use present tense when talking about things happening now or things that happen regularly. Okay, things that happen now or things that happen regularly. That's when we use present tense. Okay, so things happening now, okay, or things that happen regularly. Okay, things happening now or things that happen regularly. Please, if you are with me, kindly drop a thumbs up so I know you can hear me clearly and you are with me. All right, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so present tense, like I said, we use present tenses when talking about things happening now or things that happen regularly. So the first tense we are looking at under the present tenses is the simple present tense. The simple present tense. Thank you. All right. So we have the simple present tense. Okay, so when we talk about the simple present tense, we're talking about things that happen all the time or things that are always true. Okay, so things that happen all the time or things that are always true. Okay, so we can have them like simple present tense, things that happen all the time or things that are always true. Okay, so um, you can think of something like the sun. We're familiar with the sun. The sun rises and it sets. Okay, that's something that happens all the time. It happens every day. Okay, so the sun rises and it sets. So that's what it looks like in simple present tense. So when you think about simple present tense, you're talking about things that happen all the time. So when you say something happen all the time, you're familiar with the fact that okay, when you say this, it means that it happens all the time, or things that are always true. Something like facts. Okay, something like facts. All right. Now let's look at an example. And we can have an example like day. She reads every day. Now, reads is our tense. Of course, when we are talking about tense, it means we are dealing with verbs. All right, because verbs are action words. All right, words that show action, words that show what we do basically. So when you're talking about tenses, you're basically talking about verbs. All right, so your verbs in your sentences show your tenses. They show whether the tense is in the present or it's in the past or it's in the future. Okay, so when we say she reads every day, okay, we talk about the simple present tense as something that happened all the time. or things that are always true. In this case, when you say she reads every day, it means that reading is a habit. Okay, reading is a habit. She does it every day. It happens all the time. So in this case, you say reads is in the simple present tense. So reads here is in the simple present, okay, tense, because it's something that happens all the time. She reads every day. And do not forget, I remember when we started this whole lesson, I keep mentioning context. You cannot do English language without context. So your context helps you to understand even your tenses better. All right. So from our context, and when you talk about context, you're talking about the other words found in a sentence. All right. Other words that would give you more meaning to a specific word that you are looking at. All right. So when you say she reads every day, there is a context to help us understand that the reads there is something that happens all the time. Okay. And it's in the simple present tense. Okay. All right. We have another example like water boils at 100 degree. Okay. I'm not a scientist, but we can use this as an example. All right. So we can say water boils at 100 degrees. All right. I hope I'm writing it correctly. Okay. So water boils at 100 degrees. Okay. So if this is a fact, then it means it's a fact. Okay. It means it's a fact. It means it's something that is always true. It's a fact and it is something that is always true. Water boils at 100 degrees. Okay, something that is a fact or something that is always true. So it means our boys here, this boys, which is our verb, is a simple present tense. A simple present tense. Now, do not be confused. All the classes, like I mentioned when we started the lesson, try as much as possible not to miss any part of this class, because one of the things that we did last week in the last class was to look at subject verb agreement. Now, here is a subject, here is a verb. The subject is agreeing because the subject is singular. Okay, and when you have a singular subject, I don't want to go back into what we did already, so if you missed the class, kindly go back to our YouTube channel and see what we did on subject verb agreement. But quickly, when you have a subject, it means your subject, okay, has to agree with your verb. Because the subject is singular, you're having a verb that agrees with it. And your verb is carrying an S because your subject is singular. All right. So the same goes for water boils at 100 degrees. All right. So if, for instance, your subject in example one is day, you already know that read is not going to carry an S. So it means you're going to say they read every day. Okay, they read every day instead of they reads every day. Then you say she reads every day instead of she read every day. All right, I hope you get where we're coming from. So we have been able to look at what simple present tense is under the present tenses. Now we move to the next tense under the present tenses. I'm going to wipe off the board. All right. The second tense we are looking at is the present continuous tense. The present continuous tense. Okay. So we have the present continuous tense. Okay. When we say present continuous, okay, we are talking about something that is happening right now or something that's happening soon. Okay, something that's happening right now. It's different from the simple present of something that happens every day, or something that's a fact, something that's always true. In the case of present continuous, it means something happening at this moment. Okay, like I am talking right now. So this is a present continuous tense. Something happening right now, or something happening soon. Okay, so you can imagine it as someone taking a photo of you. Okay, it's that's an action that's happening at the moment. Someone taking a photo of you, it's an action happening at the moment. Okay, so you can have an example like she's reading now. Okay, she's reading now. So we have she is reading now. Okay, so this is happening at the moment. Okay, it's something happening at the moment. All right, we quickly look at the next tense, which is the present perfect tense. The present perfect tense. Okay, present perfect tense. All right. So for present continuous, I said present continuous refers to something happening right now. Okay, basically something happening right now. So let me have that written. Something happening right now. And then the present perfect tense talks about something that started before now, but it still matters. Okay, it started before now, but it matters presently. Okay, so you can think of it as if you are baking a cake. Okay, if you're baking a cake, if you're familiar with baking, of course, you have to get all your ingredients, you have to mix your ingredients, and then you have to bake for a certain period of time. Okay, so when you think of the cake in the oven, of course, you started baking. You're not baking right now. Okay, the cake may still be baking at the moment, but you started baking it earlier before now, and it's still affecting the present because the cake itself is still baking. So you can imagine it like that. So that's present perfect. It's like something that happened in the past but is showing, or it's reflecting in the present. Okay, so you started baking, but the baking still has an effect, or is still affecting the present. So you can have an example like she has read 3 books this week. Okay, so we can have an example like she has read she has read 3 books this week. Okay, she has read 3 books this week. Or you can say something like, I have lost my keys. I have lost my keys. Of course. Now she has read is showing that something happened in the past. Okay. But because it happened in the past doesn't mean it ended in the past. Okay. It's something that's still reflecting even in the present. All right. So she has read 3 books this week. So it means she started reading earlier, but it's still very relevant right now. It's still relevant this moment. I have lost my keys. It means I lost them sometime before now, but they are still missing. I still cannot find them. So it's affecting the present. It happened before now, but it's affecting the present. So when you have a sentence that happened before now, but affecting the present, you call it the present perfect tense. Okay, so something that happened or something that started before now but still matters. Okay, something that started before now but still matters. That's for present perfect tense. That's for present perfect tense. All right, we quickly look at the other tense, which is the last tense under present tenses. The last tense under present tenses. This tense is called present perfect continuous. Okay, present perfect continuous tense. Okay, so we say present perfect continuous tense. Okay, so we have present continuous tense, we have present perfect tense, we have present perfect continuous tense. All right, so when you talk about present perfect continuous, you're talking about something that started in the past but is still happening presently. Okay, it started happening in the past but it's still happening presently. Okay, so you can say present perfect continuous tense, something that started happening in the past but is still happening presently. That thing is still happening presently. Okay, so you can imagine it as filling a glass of water. If you have a glass of water here, okay, or you have a glass and you need to fill it with water, okay, you started an action by pouring water into that glass. Okay, so by pouring water into that glass, you're not going to finish pouring it in like 1 second. Okay, if it is a big glass and you need to take your time to fill that glass, it means it's going to take a while. So you started an action of pouring water into that glass. Okay, and you are still doing it even though you started like maybe 1 minute ago, which is in the past according to grammar. Okay, according to grammar, that started in the past, so it's a past of you having to pour water in that glass. But because it started in the past, it has not ended. It still exceeds into into the present. So this is when you say present perfect continuous tense. And you have examples like she has been reading for 2 hours. Okay, she has been reading for 2 hours. So you have examples like she has been reading for 2 hours. Okay, you can also say I have been working here. I have been working here since 2020. I have been working here since 2020. Please, if you are with me, kindly drop a thumbs up so I know you can hear me clearly and you can understand what I'm saying. Thank you. All right. So, present perfect continuous tense. Like I said, something that started in the past and is still happening in the present. Okay. So, when you say she has been reading for 2 hours, it means she started reading 2 hours ago, which is in the past, but she's still reading. Okay. So, that's present perfect continuous. When you say I've been working here since 2020, it means I started working here in 2020. That's in the past. 2020 is like 5 years ago, yeah? So that's in the past, and I still work here. So I've been working here since 2020, which is in the past, but it's still happening now because I still work here. So that's present perfect continuous. So that's for the present tenses. For the present tenses, we looked at four other tenses or four sub tenses under the present tenses, and that's the simple present, the present continuous, the present perfect, and the present perfect continuous. All right, then we quickly look at past tenses. I'm going to wipe off the board now. Thank you. All right, we are looking at past tenses. Past tenses. Okay, so for past tenses, we can say we use past tenses for things that already happened. Things that already happened. Okay, so things that already happened. That's for past tense. Okay, so we're going to be looking at some sub tenses under the past tense, and we're starting with simple past tense. Simple past tense. Okay, so we have simple past tense. All right, for simple past tense, you can say it's a completed action. A completed action. Okay, it happened in the past and it ended in the past. Okay, so simple past tense is a completed action. It happened in the past and what? And ended in the past. Okay, so we can have an example like she read a book yesterday. She read a book yesterday. She read a book yesterday. Okay, so she read a book yesterday means she finished reading the book yesterday. She started reading the book and finished reading the book yesterday, and it's over. Okay, so that's a past tense. You can also have an example like they visited Lagos last year. They visited Lagos last year. It means they went to Lagos last year, and that was the end of the trip. So that trip is in the past. It's not affecting the future. It doesn't exceed or it doesn't come into the present. So it's a completed action. It started and ended. That's simple past tense. Now we move to the second one, which is past continuous. All right. We have past continuous tense. Past continuous tense. All right. For past continuous tense, we say this is when something was happening when another thing happened. Okay? Something was happening in the past, then another thing in the past happened. So you can think of it like when you're watching a movie, okay? You're looking at the TV and you're watching a movie, then power goes off suddenly. Okay, so now you have two actions in a sentence. You were watching a movie, which is one past tense, okay, or one past action. Watching a movie, then the power goes off suddenly. So we have two happenings in that sentence, but both of them happened in the past. One started happening, then another one happened. Okay, so you can have an example like she was reading when I called. Something was happening when I did something, but both of these actions are in the past. So past continuous. Okay, all right. So she was reading when I called. So we can have the definition as something that was happening when another thing happened. Something happening something happening when another thing happened. Okay, so I said she was watching a movie or she was reading. She was reading when I called. Okay, she was reading when I called. Okay, this was happening in the past. She was reading when I called. So something was happening when another thing happened. So when you see sentences like this, you call them past continuous tense. Or when you see tenses like this, you call them past continuous tense. All right. The next tense we are looking at under the past tenses is the past perfect tense. The past perfect tense. Okay, so we have the past perfect tense. All right, when we talk about the past perfect tense, okay, it means we are talking about one thing happened before another past action. Do not mix it up with the one we just finished. I'm going to differentiate them. Okay, past perfect. One thing happened before another past action. Okay, so you can think of it like um you eating before a movie. You ate before you started watching a movie. You ate before you started watching a movie. So it means you finished eating before the movie started. Whereas the one I just finished explaining, all right, the past continuous means something was happening. The past perfect means something happened. Okay, something happened before another past action. Past continuous is something was happening in the past before another past action happened. Okay, so that's where we have she was reading, she was doing something, reading as in continuous. But the past perfect, okay, you can have she had read. Okay, she had read before watching the movie. She had read before watching the movie. That's past perfect. So one thing happened before another past action. One thing happened. Okay, something happened before another past action. One thing happened before another past action. All right. So you have an example like she had read the book before watching the movie. She had read the book. She had read the book before watching the movie. Okay. So this is showing past perfect tense. All right. The last tense we are looking at under past tenses is the past perfect continuous tense. Past perfect continuous tense. Okay, so we have past perfect continuous tense. Past perfect continuous tense. All right, when we talk about past perfect continuous tense, it means that something was happening for a while before another thing happened. Okay, something was happening for a while before another thing happened. So you can think of it as running for like 30 minutes before the rain started. Okay, running for a while, like 30 minutes thereabout, before another past event. Okay, so you have examples like she had been reading for 2 hours before he arrived. Okay, she had been reading. We can have this example. She had been reading for 2 hours before he arrived. She had been reading for 2 hours before he arrived. Okay, so this means that she was doing something. Okay, she was reading continuously, and after 2 hours of reading, after 2 hours of something happening, then another thing now happened. He arrived. So something was happening for a while before another past event. You can also have an example like they had been working there for 5 years before leaving. Okay, they had been working there for 5 years before leaving. It means they worked at a place for 5 years before they finally left. So when you talk about past perfect continuous tense, it means something was happening for a while before another past event. All right, and finally, we are looking at the future tenses. The future tenses. I'm going to wipe off the board now. The future tenses. So, like I mentioned at the beginning of the class, we looked at three major tenses: the present tenses, the past tenses, and the future tenses. We already looked at the present and the past tenses. Okay, we looked at the present and the past tenses. Now we are looking at the future tenses. The future tenses. Okay. And when you talk about the future tenses, you're talking about something, okay, something that's or when you talk about future tenses, we talk about future tenses for things that will happen later. Okay, so things that will happen later. Safe to say that future tenses refer to things that will happen later, of course, from the word future. Okay, things that will happen later. All right, so we have the simple future tense, the simple future tense. So when you talk about the simple future tense, you're talking about a decision or a plan for later. A decision or a plan for later. Okay, so you can imagine just packing your bag for a trip next week. So you are planning for later. You're not planning for the present, or you didn't plan, but you're planning for later. So you can say something like, she will read the book tomorrow. So that's like a decision or plan for later. Okay, so she will read the book tomorrow. She will read the book tomorrow. That's for simple future tense. The next tense we are looking at is future continuous tense. Future continuous tense. Okay, future continuous tense. Okay, so when you talk about future continuous tense, you're talking about something that will be happening at a specific time. Okay, so you can say happening at a specific time. Happening at a specific time. Okay, happening at a specific time. So you can think about um, watching a movie tomorrow by a certain time. Okay, So you can use examples like she will be reading or she will be watching a movie at 8 p.m. today or at 8 p.m. tomorrow. Okay, so something happening at a specific time in the future. That's like future continuous tense. All right, and then for the future perfect tense, okay, this is the next tense that we are looking at, the future perfect. Okay, the future perfect tense. You think about the future perfect tense as something that will be done before a certain time in the future. Something that will be done before a certain time in the future. So you can think of it as a deadline. You need to finish your homework before a certain period of time. Okay, you can imagine it as something like future perfect. So you can have examples like she will have read the book by tomorrow. So say tomorrow will be the deadline, it means she would have completed the book. That's like future perfect tense, something that will be done. Not something you will be doing, but
9,000.
something that will be
Nine
done
thousand.
at a certain time in the
Maybe.
future. Right. And then lastly, we look at future perfect continuous. Okay. Future perfect continuous. So future perfect continuous. All right. When you have future perfect continuous, it means you're talking about something that would have been happening for a while before a future time. Okay, so think of it as studying for like 5 hours before your exam starts. Okay, something that will be happening in the future for a while before a future time. So the future time is your exam time. All right, so you are thinking of yourself studying for a while, for like 5 hours. You did not study, you are not studying. You are not studying, you are planning to study for 5 hours before your exam starts. So it's like something that will have been happening for a while before the future time. So you can use examples like by 5 p.m., she will have been reading for 3 hours. By 5 p.m., she will have been reading for 5 hours. That means that at 5 p.m., she
She
will still be reading and then she will have been doing it for 5 hours. Okay? So she will have been doing it for 5 hours. That's the future perfect continuous. And that's the last one under the future tenses. So, quickly before we look at a past question, we have looked at tenses and their correct usage today. And I mentioned that tenses tell us when something happens. So, we talk about past,
who be
as it already happened. We talk about present as it is happening now. We talk about future as it will happen later. So we have
we
present tenses. Under the present tenses, we have present continuous, present perfect, present perfect continuous. For past tenses, we have simple past, we have past continuous, we have past perfect, we have past perfect continuous. And then for future tenses, we have simple future, we have future
future
continuous,
continuous
we have
and
future perfect, and we
future
have
perfect
future
tense.
perfect
Future perfect
continuous. All right,
continuous.
so before we end the class for today, this question is from UTME 2010. UTME 2010. I'm wiping off the board now.
Wipe. Because I was unable to
Okay,
see more.
we're going to see the question.
Yeah.
Okay, so it says choose the option that best
Record.
completes the gap. And the question or the sentence says, long after everyone dashed the hall, Obi still sat inside. Okay, long after everyone dashed the hall, Obi still sat inside. And we have options A to D. We have left, we have is leaving, we have as left, and we have had left. All right. So this sentence talks about two past events.
Okay.
Everyone left the hall, but Obi was still sitting inside after that. So that's showing past perfect, okay? Which is showing one action before another past action. Okay, everyone left the hall, but Obi was still sitting inside after. So that's a past past perfect tense. And the only past perfect tense we have here is option D. Option D as the only past perfect. All right. So option A is just simple past, option B is present tense, and option C is present perfect. So that makes option D a correct option for this sentence. All right. So this brings us to the end of the class today, and I will see you in the next class. All right. Bye bye.